Welcome everybody to New Heart, New World. I'm Rasika Manjari, and today I'm going to talk about the Bhakti Yoga worldview. Now, having a worldview is so important because when we understand ourselves in the context of our world, our environment, of the people around us, of nature, then of course this gives meaning and purpose to our lives, and we understand where we fit in, where we fit into the scheme of things, where we belong, and what is our origin and what is our destination. So when we understand this as part of our worldview, then life is so much easier because we know where we've come from and also where we're going. We have purpose, we have true understanding of who we are. Now, unfortunately, humanity as a whole in this regard is a little bit lost, simply because traditionally those worldviews that would hold these concepts of self in the context of the rest of the world have been lost along the way. These bodies of understanding, these bodies of knowledge that give us understanding of where we fit in and where we belong, have somehow become lost as our societies become increasingly secular and less inclined to adopt those traditional understandings of the worldview. So in effect, what's happened is that these worldviews that were so protective in a way of our mental health, because when we understood who we were and where we're going, then we felt at peace at some level because everything had meaning and purpose and everything had its place. However, when we no longer have this framework and that protective shield, in a sense, has gone for many of us, then we find ourselves a little bit lost. And things such as mental illness can become have become such a prominent part of our experience today in our societies as a whole. Now, the Vedas are a body of knowledge, a vast body of knowledge that encompass all of human knowledge, all knowledge that is required to living a satisfactory life as a human being on the planet. So the Vedas are bodies of knowledge that originate in the eastern side of the world. And these Vedas actually encompass bodies of knowledge such as the military sciences, the medical science, the arts, so many things that form a foundation of our lives as we live on this planet. And these vast bodies of knowledge would inform traditionally people who are engaged in these aspects of understanding in various societies and various cultures, and would be instructed formally in ways of how to achieve mastery in these sciences and arts, and under their respective teachers. So we have to understand that actually Bhakti Yoga forms a part of the knowledge of the Vedas. However, Bhakti Yoga is understood as the cream of the Vedas. Bhakti Yoga is actually the yoga of love, because Bhakti, in its true essential meaning, means devotion, and yoga means to yoke, to unite, to connect. So Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of divine love. Now, this highest form of human knowledge trumps everything else, so that Vedas in their entirety, in the vastness of their knowledge and content, is trumped by this cream of their essence, which is Bhakti Yoga. Now, the Bhakti Yoga worldview it's very handy in many ways, and it would come in handy for many of us who don't really have our own worldview in a complete sense. And the reason it's handy is because it's all encompassing, it's all inclusive. Nothing and no one is left out of this worldview. So if you consider our world as part of a universe, and that universe, imagine that universe as being the size of a mustard seed. I hope you're all familiar with mustard seeds, but imagine that our universe was the size of a mustard seed. Now imagine a huge container or sack of these mustard seeds. Now you get a picture of our insignificance as part of this wider creation and the cosmos as we know it. However, even though our universe, the size of a mustard seed, in the context of trillions of other universes, is part of the Bhakti worldview, which brings us to an understanding of where we actually fit in as individuals, it may seem to us that, well, we're really insignificant and what's the point? However, we have to understand that to the degree that this makes us appear insignificant, to that same degree we are important and significant at the level of the heart. So this importance of us as individual living beings does not get eclipsed by the seeming vastness of the cosmos and creation in its apparent, to the extent that we can barely even imagine it. We are important at the level of the heart, at the level of the soul, because we are all a part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, Krishna, which is also part of the Bhakti Yoga worldview. Now, I'd like to explain this Bhakti Yoga worldview in a series of, steps, if you like, that are based on the 5 main topics of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita as it is a core foundational text of the Bhakti Yoga philosophy, and it's spoken by Krishna, or God, himself to his dear friend Arjuna on a battlefield. Now, Krishna, in this incredibly instructive texts, teaches Arjuna, in the context of this impending battle that is about to take place, the principles on which Arjuna can base his actions going forward, and also gives him an understanding of who he really is in his true essence, a spirit soul, a part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. So these instructions come in the form of 700 verses, and each one helps guide us, who are in a way represented by Arjuna on the battlefield of life. It instructs us as to how we can go about living our lives in a way that is not only not harmful to ourselves or others, but actually allows us to evolve both materially and spiritually to the place of the highest achievement of humanity, which is achieving divine love and connection with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhakti Yoga in itself is actually love disguised as philosophy. So it may seem complicated if we approach the various texts which are written in Sanskrit and are very comprehensive in their teachings. they are in themselves very instructive as to how to go about reaching the ultimate goal of life, which in the Bhakti Yoga worldview is to connect in loving reciprocation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in essence, the message, the conclusion of Bhakti Yoga is very simple. However, we as individuals in our conditioned state make it complicated in many cases. And you'll see how as I go along. So those 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita that I mentioned earlier are as follows. They cover God and also the living entity and their relationships. So the living entity is us as spirit souls, and of course our relationship with God. And the second topic is that of material nature, which is the environment that we find ourselves in, the world as we know it. And the third topic is time. So time in its eternal nature is a very fundamental aspect of the Bhagavad Gita, as is karma, which is the laws of nature and how our actions are actually the precipitators of our experience as we go through our daily lives. Now, so that's 5. So that's God and us, which is 2. So the relationship between God and us, and the material nature, time, and also karma. So I'm going to go through these one at a time, and the way in which we understand each of these topics can inform us as to what the Bhakti Yoga worldview really encompasses and means to us as individuals. So firstly, I'm going to use an example of a verse from the Bhagavad Gita for each of these 5 topics, and then just explain the worldview in the context of that verse. So the first verse that I'm going to use as an example encompasses the nature of God and also the living entity or the spirit soul. So it's verse 10.8 from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and it is as follows. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So you have to understand that this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Krishna is saying, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. So this is actually, in a very brief and concise way, summarizing who Krishna is, and in the context of the Bhakti Yoga worldview. Krishna is the source and the origin of everything. And then in the same verse he goes on to say that the wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So this refers to us as living entities. So we are considered wise when we understand that Krishna is the source of everything, and he's also the object of our worship. And when we say worship, we mean that divine loving connection whereby we invest ourselves in re-establishing that connection, which unfortunately has been forgotten along the way in our sojourn through these material bodies and lives, of which we'll talk about a bit more in a moment. So in this verse, we understand that Krishna, being the origin of everything, expands himself in many different varieties of forms and expressions, and it includes expanding himself into this material plane of existence, because as the verse mentioned, there is a spiritual plane of existence and a material plane of existence. The spiritual plane is much larger than the material plane, but at the moment here we are finding ourselves on the material plane of existence, and Krishna does not forget us in this state in the material world. He simply expands himself to penetrate every atom and every living entity, so that he accompanies each spirit soul on their journey through the material world, from life to life to life, and he acts as a witness and reciprocates with us in the way in which we choose to connect with him from life to life. So that's, in summary, the worldview as it pertains to that first topic of the Bhagavad Gita, which is, or the first two topics of the Bhagavad Gita, which is God and the spirit soul, or the living entity. So now we move on to the second topic, which is material nature. So I'll read you the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which exemplifies the concept of material nature and how we as living entities relate to it. So this comes from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 27. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego. Now, false ego refers to that which we think we are, but we're actually not. So it refers to that aspect of us that we identify with, because being in these material bodies, we tend to identify with them and with our activities as we go about our lives housed in these bodies. However, in the context of the Bhagavad Gita, this is our false identity. It's not who we truly are, because who we truly are goes beyond these bodies to the essence of our identities, which is truly spiritual in nature. We are spirit souls. So this false part of ourselves thinks himself or herself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So busily, we're running around doing our activities as we go about our daily lives. But actually, and we think we're in charge, we think we're in control, we think we're doing exactly what we want to do from moment to moment. However, the Bhagavad Gita is telling us that actually it's not really us that's doing this, but it's actually us under the influence of the three material modes of nature. Now, the three material modes of nature are levels of influence that affect our activities and our decisions and our choices from moment to moment. And we are influenced by these three modes to different degrees. However, usually one tends to predominate in our lives as individuals, and that can differ from individual to individual. The three modes of nature are the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So they can influence us in various combined, in a manner that combines all of their effects, as I mentioned, but usually one tends to predominate in each individual. Now that's another whole conversation in itself, so I'll leave that for another video. However, suffice it to say that these material modes are very powerful and instrumental in directing our activities and choices from moment to moment. So this is called conditioning in a sense. So that false sense of who we are, that false ego, is conditioned by these three material modes. And what happens is that the spiritual nature and identity of the individual is covered over by these these material concepts of goodness, passion and ignorance. So it's a bit like, you can think of it as an actor on a stage. But unfortunately, that actor has gone a little bit mad in the sense that he truly believes he is the character that he's playing as an actor on the stage at that moment. And that's a little bit like our position at the moment, is that we really believe we're who we are in these bodies, but we're not much more than actors on a stage. And in a way, these material modes function as a way of allowing us to express our desires at a false ego level, so that falsely identifying ourselves with our bodies level. And it provides the playground of the material world for us to fulfill those desires. So it's a way of allowing us to be free in a sense. However, we have to understand that while we're identifying ourselves with these false egos and being ruled by the three modes of material nature, we might think we're free, we might think we're doing exactly as we want, but in actual fact, we aren't free. We're bound up, and we're actually chained to this notion of the three modes of material nature, until, of course, we make a decision to transcend those modes. And I'll come to that in a moment. So the fourth topic of the Bhagavad Gita in the context of our Bhakti Yoga worldview today is that of time. So I'll read you the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which comes from chapter 11, verse 32. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Time I am, the destroyer of the worlds." Now, this is just the beginning part of the verse, but it's enough to give us an idea of what Krishna means when he speaks these words. So, time I am, destroyer of the worlds. So, as we mentioned in the first part of the 5 limbs of this Bhakti Yoga worldview, Krishna has stated already that he is the origin of everything. Everything emanates from him, which includes concepts and impersonal aspects of life as we know it, such as time. So, time I am. So he, as well as everything else, is time. And time, in its essential function, is actually a destroyer, because over time, in the material platform, on the material level of existence, everything ultimately comes to destruction. So you may have understood already in your own life that nothing lasts forever in the material world anyway. So everything is temporary. Everything has a shelf life, if you like. There's nothing that exists permanently. And in this way, Krishna expresses himself as time, the ultimate destroyer. But we have to understand that this destruction is not a destruction of who we are as spirit souls. Of course, we all come to a point in our lives when we actually leave these bodies. We die. We move on to the next body, which is also part of the Bhakti Yoga worldview. And this natural cycle of life is a way of the soul moving from one experience to another, in the hope that at some point on this cycle of, this seemingly endless cycle of reincarnation, that at some point he or she will come to an understanding of who they truly are in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the way they might come across this understanding is through hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead through various sources, such as this, for example, and also coming across others who have already experienced their connection with the Supreme Lord and understand their position within the worldview of Bhakti Yoga. And in this way, they have a better understanding of what their origin is and their destination is, and also what to do in between, which is part of the reason why the Bhakti Yoga worldview is so important, because it gives us a purpose to our action and a deeper comprehension of why, what, and how we are in this material world. So this concept of time is basically expressed ultimately in the continuous cycling of 4 different ages, or yugas as they're called in Sanskrit. So the world as we know it cycles continuously through these 4 ages, and ultimately and this goes on indefinitely. So the cycles of ages are the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. Now we are currently in the Iron Age, which is the age of destruction and degeneration, quarrel and hypocrisy. So we are in a winter age of sorts. And it's just part of a continuous cycle of life. So the destruction and chaos and crisis and upheavals that we see in our world around us is actually just an expression of one of the cycles, of one of these ages that the world continuously cycles through. It was meant to be that way, and we were meant to be here at this point in time. And I mentioned the concept of reincarnation earlier, and this is a way of, as I said, us trying to achieve the end point, the conclusion of our lives in these material bodies, which is to ultimately find that supreme divine connection of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this reincarnation also cycles indefinitely as we go from life to life to life, yuga to yuga to yuga. And it will be indefinite and almost eternal. It seems that way, but ultimately the end goal, when we understand it, can put a stop and really create a break in this cycle so that we don't have to be on this treadmill ever again. We can actually emerge from this cycle and break the chains of the bondage to this material world, which I mentioned earlier, that we are dictated in terms of what we do by the material modes of nature. However, we can actually put a stop to this once and for all, and that is through Bhakti Yoga. So this is what the Bhakti Yoga worldview tells us, that it's not a life sentence, or it's not a lifetime sentence eternally. It is actually our lives in these bodies are temporary manifestations of our desire to enjoy ourselves in this world. But really we have to understand through the Bhakti Yoga worldview that this is just not where it's at. So that brings us to the 5th topic of the Bhagavad Gita in the context of the Bhakti Yoga worldview, which is that of karma. Now, you've probably all heard of karma. It's a very common household term these days. And basically karma just means action, to act. And it is in the context of how we behave from moment to moment influences our experiences and outcomes in the future. So our decisions and choices have bearing on how we reap the rewards or otherwise of our current actions. So the verse I'm going to quote from the Bhagavad Gita is from chapter 2, verse 5. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all all work. So here, Krishna is saying that when one is engaged in devotional service, which is, remember, the conclusion of Bhakti Yoga, the cream of the Vedas. So the conclusion of Bhakti Yoga is to engage in devotional service, because everything we spoke about earlier in terms of our bondage to the material nature and our I guess, enslavement to the concept of time and its destructive capacity, then if we want to be free of all that, then the way to do it is to engage in devotional service. And I'll come to that more in a little moment. But it's interesting, though, in this verse, Krishna is saying that a man engaged or a woman engaged in devotional service rids him or herself of both good and bad reactions. So sometimes, well, many of us are on a quest to, create good karma for ourselves and enjoy the rewards and spoils of that. However, we can see in this verse that we not only don't want bad karma, but we don't want good karma either. We don't want any karma. We just want to get rid of karma, because karma represents that entanglement that I was talking about in relation to this material world and our bodies and our lives within these material planes of existence. So we want to get rid of karma altogether. And, that might sound shocking, and, well, how can we possibly even do that? But the way is very clear in the Bhakti Yoga philosophy, and also is just stated now in the Bhagavad Gita. So the second part of this verse is saying, Krishna is saying, therefore strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So work is referring to karma, but the art, which is action, work and action are synonymous in a sense. But the art of that, the art of escaping from that in a sense, is yoga, and he's referring to Bhakti Yoga, devotional service or devotional connection with the divine. So here we can see we've spoken about God and the spirit soul and their connection with each other in the Bhakti Yoga worldview. We spoke about material nature and how the living entity or spirit soul is bound up by the rules of nature, the laws of nature, and really is dictated from moment to moment in terms of decisions, choices and activities by the three modes of material nature. We also spoke about time and how Krishna is an expression of time, and or time is an expression of Krishna, and how time ultimately destroys everything in this material world. And also we spoke now just about karma, and how karma is the glue really that holds everything together in the material world, and how it obliges us to keep coming back from life to life to life. And it can be an endless repetitious cycle if we don't break that cycle at some point. So in this way, you can see how a worldview or a framework in which to understand our position in this world, in the universe, with each other and with our environment is so essential to giving us that foundational understanding of how we can engage ourselves in activities that are going to be helpful for us in the long term. And when I talk about long term, I mean for infinity, for eternity. So, performing a good deed or helping our neighbor may be beneficial for us in terms of generating good karma and making our lives more livable in this life, or maybe even in the next life. However, Bhakti Yoga, once one engages in Bhakti Yoga, it covers everything. So automatically we become better people, because we're doing basically the most we're engaging in the highest goal of what is possible for humanity. So naturally what happens is when one engages in that process, one is purified. The soul, the supreme spiritual essence is purified, and we naturally become good people. So we're naturally doing good, we're naturally generating good karma. However, that's not what we're interested in at this stage, because we have gone beyond the good and the bad karma. We're transcending that by engaging in devotional service. And you know, in previous ages, it was very difficult to achieve this kind of perfection of engaging oneself fully in the occupation of devotional service, because it wasn't so accessible, or it wasn't so simple to perform. It was very complicated. And as I mentioned, those previous ages which the world cycles through were more advanced than this Iron Age, the 3 ages that come before it. However, proportionately, it was more difficult to achieve the perfection of Bhakti Yoga. So similarly, because our age is such a difficult one that we're in, and spiritual life is not encouraged, or it's not really, this material world is so not conducive to spiritual life, then again, proportionately, we have a concession, if you like. So the concession is that we have ready access to basically the key of devotional service and what it will take to actually help us break this cycle of repeated birth and death once and for all. Now, we are instructed by the incredible contribution and works of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who brought the incredible knowledge of Bhakti Yoga to us in the West from the East and translated many important texts from Sanskrit into English. So it is under his instruction that we are guided to just chant Hare Krishna. And in this way, we can achieve the ultimate goal of humanity, which is that divine spiritual connection with the Supreme Lord. Now, just to chant Hare Krishna involves the chanting and repetition of a sacred Maha Mantra, which is called the Maha Mantra, or the Great Mantra. So the Maha Mantra is actually the great liberator of the mind, because mantra means to liberate the mind. So I'll recite the Maha Mantra now for you, and it might just pay to listen carefully and to imbibe the sound, and just allow it to penetrate your consciousness. And you might wish to refer to previous videos and also my website for more information. The website is newheart-newworld.com, and there you can find a lot more about the meaning of the Maha Mantra and how it can help you in your daily life. So I'll recite the Maha Mantra now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this mantra is actually an opportunity to have a satisfactory focus of intention of our daily thoughts and our daily practice of life. Because when incorporated into a daily spiritual practice, it becomes a life practice in a way, because really there becomes no difference when we're engaged in devotional service. Our spiritual and material lives merge because we have transcended the bondage of material limitations, and because we're engaged in this process of devotional service, of which the essence is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Because ultimately in this world, it's so difficult to find something satisfactory to focus our minds on, to meditate on, to give us joy from moment to moment as we think our thoughts, the billions that we have every day. Because of this lack of a satisfactory object of focus and meditation, there is so much anxiety in the world, and we're troubled at so many varying levels. And in this way, Bhakti Yoga, through its philosophy, its teachings, its stories, its incredible worldview, as we just spoke of today, and also the Maha Mantra, which is the connector of all of these divine understandings, is actually the way we'll be able to deliver ourselves from an eternal cycle of birth and death. So I invite you to find out more about the Maha Mantra and also to try and incorporate it into your daily life. And there are ways you can do that. There is a way that you can chant on personal japa beads, and you can find more information about that on my website. And also a very wonderful and beautiful way to chant the Maha Mantra is in a congregational setting where the mantra is chanted in the company of like-minded devotees or Bhakti Yoga practitioners. So I'll be creating many more videos on various secrets of Bhakti Yoga, so please stay tuned. And until then, I wish you all well. Bye for now.